The galaxy had always been a place ruled by the powerful and the mysterious. Numerous civilizations controlled vast territories, each one boasting mighty warships that patrolled their borders and kept their enemies at bay. These ships were technological marvels, able to scan the surroundings, detect energy signatures, and read the smallest shifts in the environment. In all the sectors of the galaxy, scanning was a simple and well-understood process. But when human warships entered the picture, everything changed. It wasn't their size, their weaponry, or their speed that caused alarm. It was something far more unnerving. A few years earlier, the first human warship, the Sovereign, had wandered into a peaceful star system in the Gorgon sector. The inhabitants of this system, a race of advanced beings, were confident in their ability to scan and interpret the ships that passed through their domain. They had never met a vessel they couldn't understand. But when the Sovereign arrived, something went wrong. Attempts to scan the ship's structure, energy, or anything else met with failure. The sensors simply couldn't penetrate the ship. No matter how advanced the equipment, the ship remained an impenetrable enigma. The humans didn't engage in combat or act aggressively. They didn't even make any threats. They simply said, "Hello," through a communications channel, and then, strangely, everything went silent. Without any warning, the entire star, systems communication and monitoring systems went dark. There were no signs of an attack or any unusual activity, but the sudden, eerie silence spread quickly. For the first time in their history, the Gorgon sector had encountered something it could neither understand nor control. What unnerved the galaxy more than the ship's ability to remain undetected was the strange, invisible power it seemed to exude. It wasn't just a matter of technological superiority. It was something deeper, something that couldn't be easily explained. As word of the incident spread, whispers began to circulate. One human warship, not even the most powerful ship in the galaxy, had forced an entire sector to go quiet. No one knew what was happening. No one understood the strange effect this ship seemed to have. It wasn't just about being unseen or unread. It was about something that couldn't be sensed, something that defied all known forms of scanning. The galaxy, usually so certain of its own technological advancements, now feared a force that didn't come from weapons or strength, but from an unknown source within the humans. It was this uncertainty, this inability to comprehend the power of the human warships, that sparked a deep, growing fear among the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. As the Sovereign and other human ships traveled through space, the galaxy held its breath, knowing they could no longer rely on their technology to understand what was out there. And so, the fear began. It was not the ships themselves that were feared, but what might happen if they were ever fully understood. The mystery surrounding human warships grew with each passing day. While the galaxy's civilizations had long prided themselves on their technological superiority, none could make sense of the phenomena they encountered when attempting to scan human ships. It wasn't simply that these ships were cloaked in some advanced form of stealth technology. It was something far more profound. Human warships, despite their relatively modest size and unspectacular weaponry, seemed to possess an entirely unique ability, one that baffled even the greatest minds in the galaxy. At first, scientists and military leaders believed that the human ships were simply hiding some incredible technology, a secret that could revolutionize warfare. But as more ships attempted to probe the Sovereign and other human vessels, they realized it was not the physical structure of the ships that defied explanation. It was what they could not see. The advanced scanners deployed by various races, including the Zalzar Empire, could detect energy signatures, matter, and even the faintest vibrations. Yet when focused on human warships, these instruments would behave erratically. Instead of returning data on the ship's fuel levels or structural integrity, they would inexplicably begin to pick up strange patterns, memories, fleeting images, and emotions. The scanning equipment would interpret the data as though it were sensing human minds rather than physical objects. These were not the simple energy fields or radiation signatures that scanners were designed to measure. What the scanners detected felt like personal experiences, flashes of memory, emotional reactions, thoughts, and fears. In the beginning, the alien species dismissed these glitches as mere interference or malfunctioning technology. However, it soon became clear that something far stranger was at play. One particular incident involving a scanning ship from the Vrexian Alliance left the crew shaken. They had attempted to read the human vessel's energy signatures, only for their instruments to flood with images of past battles, memories of pain, and moments of intense sorrow. It wasn't just the ship that was being scanned, it was the minds of the humans aboard it. The crew of the Vrexian ship was overwhelmed by the raw emotions, their own thoughts melding with those they had accidentally picked up from the human minds. It was as though the humans had built their ships with some kind of mental shield or filter that allowed them to project their own consciousness into the very structure of their vessels. The deeper they probed, the more their minds became entwined with the humans. And then the realization hit. Human warships weren't just physical machines. They were conduits for human minds. The crew aboard the Sovereign had been warned about the danger of probing too deeply. They were not using their ships for warfare, but for something far more intimate. It was as if each ship carried a part of its crew's soul. Scanning these ships, therefore, wasn't about finding weaknesses or vulnerabilities. It was about touching the deepest, most private corners of the human experience. The galaxy had never encountered such a phenomenon before, and the consequences of such encounters were enough to paralyze the most powerful fleets. As word of this new discovery spread, a creeping dread settled over the galaxy. What would happen if a hostile race probed too deeply? Would the minds of those who tried to scan be forever altered? The more the galaxy learned, the more they understood that the real power of human warships lay not in their physical design, but in the uncharted territory of the human mind itself. As word of the mysterious human warships spread across the galaxy, the fear and confusion deepened. At first, the unknown abilities of these ships seemed like nothing more than an anomaly, something that could be chalked up to human ingenuity or an unexpected technological leap. But as more incidents occurred, it became clear that these warships represented something much more profound, a force that could not be easily understood or controlled. The galaxy's most powerful civilizations had always prided themselves on their technological prowess. Every race had mastered the art of scanning, observing, and understanding the very nature of the universe around them. But when it came to human ships, even the most advanced systems failed. This wasn't just about the inability to detect energy signatures or scan the ships for weaknesses. It was about the unsettling feeling that something far more complex and invisible was at play. Attempts to scan human warships led to strange results, fleeting thoughts, fragmented emotions, and memories that seemed to have no place in the data. Some scanning vessels, after coming into contact with human ships, reported their crew members experiencing strange sensations, as if they were momentarily pulled into the minds of those aboard the human vessels. The more the galaxy learned about human warships, the more they realized that the true fear lay not in the ships themselves, but in their effect on anyone who tried to probe them. Those who had attempted to scan the Sovereign and other human vessels began to report strange occurrences. Some experienced vivid dreams that felt far too real, while others heard whispers in their minds, as though the ship was communicating with them without words. The deeper they probed, the more they found themselves unable to distinguish between their own thoughts and the thoughts of the human crew. It was as if the ships carried a piece of the human mind, a fragment of their very consciousness embedded in the vessels themselves. The galaxy had never encountered anything like this before. There were rumors that human warships were not simply vehicles of war, but living, breathing entities in their own right, creations born not from cold machines, but from the human will. carrying the emotions, fears, and desires of those who sailed them. Some speculated that the ships were an extension of the humans' consciousness, an intricate link between their minds and their technology. But no one could confirm these theories, as every attempt to understand only led to more confusion. The fear began to spread like wildfire. At first, the fear was born out of uncertainty. No one knew exactly what the human ships were capable of, or how they could affect others. But as the incidents piled up, a new fear took root. The fear of what would happen if a hostile race scanned a human warship and uncovered something they weren't meant to see. The human mind, after all, was one of the most powerful and unpredictable forces in the galaxy. The thought of other races tapping into that power, and potentially being overwhelmed by it, was enough to make even the most powerful fleets hesitant. It wasn't just about war anymore. It was about something far more intangible and dangerous. The more the galaxy feared the consequences of scanning a human ship, the more they realized that the true power of these vessels lay not in their technology or their weapons, but in the mind of the humans who created them. And that, in itself, was a force that no one in the galaxy was prepared to face. The fear surrounding human warships reached a tipping point when the Galactic Council convened to address the growing crisis. Leaders from the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy gathered in a massive space station on the outer rim of the Andromeda cluster, their minds racing with a singular question: what could be done to counter this unknown threat? The Sovereign and other human warships had now made their presence known in multiple sectors, and each time, the same unsettling events occurred. Scanning these ships seemed to cause strange disturbances, anomalies that defied explanation. Yet, no one knew the source of the power these ships held. What began as curiosity about a strange anomaly soon turned into a full-fledged panic. Some races believed that the human ships had discovered a new form of energy or developed a technology far superior to their own. Others suspected that humans had tapped into something more terrifying, something that went beyond the physical realm of technology. Rumors began to spread that the warships were not just ships at all, but extensions of human minds, embodiments of thought, emotions, and consciousness, crafted into technological forms. The idea that human warships might carry the very essence of the human mind sent a wave of fear throughout the galaxy. Every scan, every attempt to penetrate the vessels, brought not only confusion, but a deep sense of unease. It was as though the ships resisted being understood, creating an unspoken barrier that kept the galaxy at arm's length. The Council debated possible solutions. Some argued for the immediate destruction of human warships, fearing that the galaxy would fall into chaos if humans were allowed to maintain this advantage. Others, more cautious, suggested that diplomacy be pursued, hoping to understand the true nature of these mysterious ships before jumping to conclusions. But despite their best efforts, no one could predict how humans would react. They had never known a species quite like this before, one that wielded such power without seeming to try, and whose warships appeared to harbor untapped forces within them. What terrified the galaxy most was the realization that scanning a human warship might not only fail, but it could also cause harm. Several exploration ships had attempted to approach the Sovereign, only to report that their scanners malfunctioned, their systems crashing or even short-circuiting in strange ways. In one case, a ship from the Xylothian Empire, after an intense scan, had its crew struck by severe migraines and disturbing hallucinations. The experience was so overwhelming that the crew was forced to abandon their mission and retreat. Some were left behind in medical bays, their minds in a state of confusion, unable to explain the sensory overload they had endured. It was becoming increasingly clear that whatever the humans had created, it was not something that could be treated as just another weapon. It wasn't something that could be destroyed with force or resolved through traditional means. The question of what made human warships so powerful had no easy answer, and every attempt to probe deeper into their secrets only led to more questions. It was no longer just about the ships. It was about what the galaxy could learn, or unlearn, about the human mind and the power hidden within their warships. What was certain was that no one in the galaxy was prepared for the truth that was still waiting to be uncovered. As the fear of human warships continued to spread, a new sense of urgency swept through the galaxy. While some races chose to act cautiously, others began to prepare for what they feared would come, a confrontation with the mysterious power that humans had somehow unleashed. The Galactic Council, however, was paralyzed by the unknown. No one had a clear strategy for dealing with the human warships, and the idea of confrontation seemed increasingly dangerous. The suspicion that the warships were not just technological marvels, but extensions of human consciousness only deepened the fear. What if scanning them was not just an attempt to understand their structure, but a potential risk to one's own mind? What if the very act of probing these ships caused something far worse than simple malfunction, a corruption of the mind itself? With each failed attempt to understand the Sovereign and similar human vessels, the galaxy began to turn inward, focusing on its own response to the unknown. Some leaders called for a united front, a coalition that could confront humans and force them to reveal their secrets. Others warned against such drastic measures, fearing that pushing humans into a corner might provoke a disaster beyond anyone's control. Yet, amid all the debate and division, one voice cut through the noise. The representative of the Thalraxians, a race known for their deep understanding of the mind and consciousness, stood up before the council and made a simple statement. "It is not the ships that we fear. It is what they carry." Her words echoed through the chamber, and for the first time, the council members fell silent, considering her meaning. The Sovereign was not just a ship, she explained. It was a vessel that carried something intangible, something that could not be quantified by scans, measurements, or even logic. It was as though the human mind itself had been woven into the fabric of the ship, transforming it into a living entity. The ship was more than just a piece of machinery. It was a part of the humans who had created it, a manifestation of their thoughts, fears, and desires. And that was what made it so dangerous. The Thalraxian representative went on to explain that the human mind was not only capable of understanding the universe, but also of shaping it. The power of thought, emotion, and will had been harnessed in a way that no other race in the galaxy had ever attempted. These warships, she said, were not merely tools for battle. They were instruments of the human will, capable of bending the laws of reality itself. The fear that gripped the galaxy was not just about the potential of these ships to cause physical destruction. It was the fear of what might happen if the human mind, an unpredictable, powerful force, became fully unleashed. The idea that these ships might possess the ability to alter minds, to change perceptions, or to create new realities was a terrifying thought. The Thalraxian representative's words sparked a new wave of anxiety. If humans had indeed discovered a way to fuse their consciousness with their warships, then every human ship became an unpredictable force, a potential catalyst for change that no one could control. The galaxy was now faced with a dilemma. How could they possibly understand or defend against something so deeply tied to the human mind? And what would happen if the humans chose to share their knowledge or, worse, turned it against the galaxy? The more they learned about the human warships, the more they realized that the fear was not just about the ships themselves. It was about the vast untapped power of the human mind and the devastating potential it held for the galaxy at large. As the galaxy grappled with the unknown power of human warships, a new, disturbing development emerged. A few of the more daring explorers and rogue factions, driven by curiosity or desperation, began to take bold steps to uncover the truth behind the mysterious vessels. The Sovereign and other human warships had been an enigma, but as fear mounted, some saw opportunity in understanding them, not just for knowledge, but for power. Among these factions was the Vrexian Alliance, a technologically advanced race known for its ruthlessness. They had long coveted the human warships, believing that if they could unlock their secrets, they could wield a power that would make their own fleets invincible. A group of Rexian scientists, against the warnings of their leaders, launched a covert mission to infiltrate a human warship. Their goal was clear: to bypass the barriers that had previously made scanning human ships so dangerous. They wanted to find a way to bypass the mental shields that seemed to protect the human consciousness embedded within the ships. It was a risky gamble, but the allure of mastering human technology was too great to resist. The Vrexian team succeeded in infiltrating a human warship, but the consequences were far more catastrophic than they could have ever imagined. As they made their way deeper into the ship's core, they began to understand the true extent of the danger. The warship wasn't just a vessel. It was a living, breathing entity in itself. Every step they took seemed to trigger a reaction from the ship, as though it were aware of their presence, responding to their thoughts and emotions. It wasn't just the ship they had to worry about. It was the consciousness of the humans who had created it. With each passing moment, the Vrexians found themselves becoming increasingly disoriented. The boundaries between their own minds and the thoughts of the humans on board the ship began to blur. The images and emotions they encountered were overwhelming. Visions of human wars, grief, joy, loss, and triumph. The warship was not just a weapon of destruction, but a vessel for the raw, unfiltered human experience. They were bombarded with memories of human struggles and desires, as if the very essence of the crew's consciousness had been poured into the ship. One by one, the Vrexian scientists began to break down. Their minds were no longer their own. They started seeing themselves as part of the human crew, living their memories, feeling their emotions, experiencing their pain. It was as though they had been infected by the ship's consciousness. In the end, the mission ended in disaster. The Vrexian ship, which had been monitoring the operation, received frantic distress signals from its crew. By the time they arrived, it was too late. The entire crew had succumbed to the overwhelming influence of the human warship. Their minds were lost, irreparably altered by the interaction. The Vrexian leadership was left with no choice but to abandon the mission and retreat. But the damage had been done. The discovery that human warships were not just machines, but sentient vessels tied to human minds, sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. The Vrexians, once confident that they could control any form of technology, were left shaken and powerless in the face of something so deeply rooted in the human mind. The fear that had been growing in the galaxy was no longer just about what humans had created. It was about the consequences of tapping into that power. The human mind was not something to be understood, controlled, or exploited. It was a force, unto itself, unpredictable and dangerous. And now, the entire galaxy was left to wonder, what would happen if humanity decided to turn its power against them? The final reckoning came when the entire galaxy had no choice but to face the consequences of humanity's unmatched power. After the Vrexian disaster, a collective unease settled over every race. The galaxy's most powerful civilizations, once confident in their technological superiority, now found themselves humbled by a force they could neither understand nor control. The human warships had proven to be something far beyond mere machines of war. They were not just vessels of destruction. They were living, breathing entities infused with the very essence of human consciousness. This revelation terrified the Galactic Council, and a decision was made. No one would approach or scan a human warship again. The fear that had been building for so long finally became a hard, unshakable truth. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations were powerless against the mind of humanity. In response, humanity remained distant. Though they had the ability to crush any opposition, they seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. The human ships stopped their raids and battles, retreating to the far corners of the galaxy, leaving the others to question why they had not been destroyed outright. What was humanity's true intent? Why had they not unleashed their full might? The silence from the humans hung heavily in the air. It became clear that the true power of the warships was not in their weapons or technology. but in their ability to change minds, to influence thought. The galaxy was now at the mercy of something far more unpredictable than any weapon, a consciousness, collective and powerful, that had the potential to reshape the fabric of reality itself. Slowly, a new narrative began to take shape. The galaxy had always viewed humanity as just another young, rising species, a species that had stumbled into power. Now, the truth was impossible to ignore. Humans were far more dangerous than any of the other races had ever realized. The warships were not merely extensions of their technology, but reflections of humanity's most profound traits: its creativity, its emotional depth, its unpredictability. In a sense, humanity had unlocked the deepest secret of the universe, something no other species had ever approached: the power to not only shape their surroundings, but to bend the very fabric of reality itself through their consciousness. The galaxy's response was divided. Some races wanted to seek peace, recognizing that humanity's power was not something to be fought, but something that could potentially be understood and negotiated with. But others, driven by fear, called for the destruction of the human fleet, certain that any further engagement would bring about their undoing. In the end, a fragile balance was struck, and humanity, now viewed as both a threat and a mystery, withdrew further into the shadows. The galaxy, though still uncertain and fearful, understood one thing with absolute clarity: humanity had become something far greater than just a species. They were now an unpredictable, unknowable force that could neither be fully understood nor contained. The fear of scanning human warships had not just been about discovering their secrets. It had been about the realization that those secrets were not meant to be uncovered. They were far beyond the comprehension of any other race, and in the end, the galaxy would have to come to terms with the fact that humanity, with its living warships and its boundless consciousness, had changed the very nature of power itself.